Looking up. This morning I haven't come dressed like, well, some of you may think I have, but I've got my David Attenborough hat on and would like to share with you the fascinating story of Histiotuthis heteropsis. Now, on the off chance that some of you don't know what I'm talking about, let me introduce you to one of them. Please. So if you were part of that obviously small percentage of society that didn't know about them before, you do now. But perhaps there's still a bit of a gap in yours and indeed everyone else's understanding. And so this morning I want to spend a bit of time talking about squid. Histiotuthis heteropsis is the scientific name for a genus of the squid family, more commonly known as the cockeyed squid, on account of its two extremely different eyes. This little creature lives at a depth of between 600 to 3,000 feet, in what is known as the ocean's twilight zone, where the sunlight, it barely filters through the deep waters. Cockeyed squid are born with two identical eyes, just like any other little squid hatchling. But as they develop into juveniles, the left eye begins to surge ahead in size, eventually forming a long tube, often with a bright yellow lens, although it looks green in that underwater photography. It spends its life swimming in a sort of oblique position with a larger eye facing slightly up and the smaller slightly down. And for many years scientists didn't understand why this was the case. But as they studied them and observed them in their natural habitat, they began to realise why. Their huge, highly sensitive eye gazes up towards the surface and it looks out for dark silhouettes of what could be its next meal, or perhaps something that wants to make a meal of it. The yellow colour filters out background light, and it breaks the camouflage up of other animals that use their own luminescence to try and hide their shadows against the watery background. In many ways, it's like they're wearing a very fancy pair of glasses, filtering out the background light and enabling them to see what's really going on. Whereas the right eyeball, that ends up less than half the size. And the squid aims that one down into the dark depths of the water, looking again for flashes of colour and light coming from any animals swimming down below them. Now you may well be sat there wondering what the biological design of a squid has anything to do with being here on a Sunday morning. You might even be asking whether, as your minister, I've lost the plot. But let me read this to you, and it will all become clear. Since then you have been raised with Christ, set your heart on things above, where Christ is seated at the right hand of God. Set your mind on things above, not on earthly things. For you died, and your life is now hidden with Christ in God. When Christ, who is your life, appears, then you also will appear with him in glory. Now those words are just a small part of Paul's letter to the Colossians, which he wrote to encourage relatively new believers to continue following the true message about the Lord, but also to warn them against other religious influences. The letter, however, has absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with a small little squid with funny eyes living in the Pacific Ocean. So by now you may well be convinced I really have lost the plot. But unlikely as it may seem, their biological makeup is a good analogy of what it means to live in our present world and at the same time with the future certainty we await as people who have been raised with Christ. Essentially what Paul is talking about is how as God's people we need to have our eyes fixed on the things above and not on earthly things. It's about where our focus needs to be as we live out our lives. When we become a Christian, our outlook on life begins to change. The things that once seemed most important, they take on a different priority. Our values begin to change, our desires, our hopes, our attitudes, all these things begin to change. And they change because our lives have a new focus, Jesus. Whereas before our awareness would have just been on what was happening in this life, that now becomes the reality of the life that is to come when we go to be with him. But obviously as believers we continue to live out our lives here on earth with our eyes fixed on what is happening around us, but at the same time our vision turns to the things above and all that God is doing. And that's why our little squid friend is such a good picture of how we should go through life. Just as the squid lives in a sense in two realms, above and below, and needs to have its eyes fixed on both of them, so too do we as believers. Obviously, we don't want to be cockeyed Christians. Not sure the world is ready for Christians who wander around with one other eye covered by some super huge monocle-like device. But it doesn't hurt to follow the squid's example. Have one eye fixed on the things above and one on what's happening below. And as we grow in our faith, then just like the squid, the eye that is fixed on the things above will grow bigger. It will see more, understand more, and help us become more aware of what God is doing. The one that looks below will continue to see all that's going on around us, but together they will help us make sense of the bigger picture. The cockeyed squid needs its different eyes to help it survive in the environment in which it lives. And in many ways, so do we, although we have one huge advantage. When we read that we are hidden with Christ in God, that means that we have a security that nothing can change. Our lives won't necessarily be easy. And for some as believers they can be incredibly hard. But there is nothing that can separate us from the love of God. Well, regardless of what goes on in this life, the day will come when he will come to take us home with him. Sadly, the world we live in isn't interested in the things of God. And he's hidden from so many. And that's why it's so important that we share the vision that we have of Jesus with the world in which we live. So for those of us who do believe, can I suggest we ask God to make us a bit more like the cockeyed squid? Give us the ability to see and discern like it does. And if perhaps you don't believe, I pray that God will break through the things of this life and reveal to you his Son Jesus, so that you too can see the things of this life and the things above. Let's pray. Lord, we thank you that your creation can speak to us in so many ways. And although it may well be an amusing picture, this little squid does very well demonstrate what Paul was saying. And so would you help us as your people to have our eyes on the things above, as they help us to make sense of the things that are happening here on earth. Would you give us the eyes to see all that we need to see? And Lord, I do pray for any who don't know you, that their eyes will come to see you, that you would reveal yourself. Lord, help us all to have a vision of you.